You know that feeling? That absolute soul-crushing certainty that the universe has picked you, specifically you, to mess with? I was having a perfectly decent Tuesday. Maybe even a good Tuesday. The sun was shining. The grill was clean. I had just perfected my recipe for smoked paprika-rubbed chicken wings. A recipe, I might add, that should be federally protected as a national treasure. Gary, a man whose greatest ambition is usually to finish a six-pack before the game ends, was enjoying this moment of suburban bliss in my humble abode outside Phoenix, Arizona. Then the mail came. It wasn't a bill. It wasn't a junk flyer for roof replacement. It was a thick, pale yellow envelope, stiff as a cheap suit, and smelling faintly of litigation. The return address didn't even have a friendly name. It was just the Pinnacle Ridge Homeowners Association, Inc. Legal Department. Cue the ominous tuba music. I swear, my heart did this funny little tap dance, which was probably just indigestion, but felt like a harbinger of doom. I ripped it open. Because, curiosity killed the cat. But the HOA just sends the cat a strongly worded letter about the color of its collar. Inside was not a friendly, "Hey Gary, your petunias look great" note. It was a formal, multi-page legal document with words like plaintiff, breach, and statutory lien. Pages of dense, tiny text that made my eyes cross. I skipped the jargon and went straight to the part where they tell me what I did wrong. Because I always skip to the ending. The charge? Failure to maintain approved exterior, luminaire hue, and fixture proximity. What the heck does that even mean? I had to read the definition in Appendix C. Turns out my front porch light, the one I bought 3 years ago at the local Home Depot because it was on sale, was two things. Its warm white LED bulb emitted a light measuring 2,600 kilodolars on the Kelvin scale, which was 100 kil above the HOA's approved 2,500 kilodollar limit for soft amber ambiance. The fixture itself, which was supposed to be mounted precisely 68 inches from the edge of the door frame, was installed at a defiant 67.5 inches. A whole half-inch! I broke the ambiance. I violated the proximity. And what was the punishment for this catastrophic assault on neighborhood uniformity? A series of fines, escalating from a gentle $50 warning to a spine-shattering $1,400 administrative fee, culminating in the final paragraph, due to continuous and willful disregard of the association's covenants, conditions, and restrictions, as CCNRs, and the failure to remit outstanding penalties, the association has initiated the process of placing a lien on the property at 4220 Crestview Lane, and intends to pursue foreclosure to recoup the outstanding balance of $22,150. Wait. Hold the phone. Did I just read that right? $22,150, and they were going to steal my house, the house I actually owned, over a light bulb that was too yellow and half an inch of bad measuring? You have to be kidding me! I yelled this at the envelope. I knew the neighbors could probably hear me, but honestly at that moment I didn't care if the President of the United States heard me. The rage was immediate, pure, and glorious. This wasn't just bureaucracy. This was full-blown, weaponized, suburban insanity. My first thought was, naturally, to call my buddy Mike. Mike is an attorney, which means he's highly educated but rarely helpful in situations that involve true chaos. "Mike, listen to this!" I practically screamed into the phone. "They're trying to foreclose on me!" "Foreclose? Gary, did you stop paying your mortgage again? Because I told you—" "No, not the mortgage. The HOA. The Pinnacle Ridge Homeowners Association, Inkbuski, sounds important, doesn't it? They sent me a notice because my porch light is too bright and not close enough to the door. Mike was silent for a beat. I could practically hear him rubbing his temples. Gary, you know you have to comply with the CC&Rs. Did you get the third notice about the light? The third notice? Mike, I thought they were just those annoying newsletters about community yoga and the dumpster schedule. I use them to line the birdcage. Gary, those aren't newsletters. They are certified legal communications. And if your fines escalate enough, yes, the HOA has the power to place a lien and foreclose. It's written into the deed. I slumped onto the couch. This was less funny and more terrifying. I could lose everything. My house, my grill, my award-winning chicken wing recipe would be homeless. This was the work of one person. I just knew it. The current HOA board president, Barbara "Barb" Calloway. Barb was a walking, talking, power-mad clipboard. She had the personality of a dried sponge and a stare that could curdle milk. She treated the HOA like she was running a small, nuclear-armed nation. Every rule was a declaration of war. Every shrub was a potential security threat. I once saw her measure a neighbor's recycling bin with a tape measure to ensure it wasn't extending past the curb on trash day. It hit me then. This wasn't about the half-inch or the Kelvin scale. This was Barb being Barb. She saw me grilling and laughing, and she decided my joy was a violation of the General Serenity and Order clause. I spent the rest of the evening staring at the foreclosure notice. I could fight it with Mike, but that would cost time, money, and most importantly, stress. And frankly, the thought of paying lawyers thousands of dollars just to argue about the color of a light bulb made me want to cry into my beer. No, I needed a better solution. A Gary solution. Something reckless, something stupid, and something that would make Barb Calloway regret the day she ever signed her name to the HOA bylaws. My eyes scanned the legal notice again, focusing not on the fines, but on the plaintiff's information, the debt amounts, and the official seals. This document wasn't just a threat, it was a paper trail. And every paper trail leads to a bank account. I suddenly remembered something Mike had joked about once, something about HOAs being awful at managing major expenses. They're always cash poor but rich in lawsuits, he'd said. They live and die by their capital reserve funds, which are always underwater because someone convinced them they needed a statue of a dolphin. A slow, unhinged grin spread across my face. If they were trying to steal my house for a measly $22,150, I was going to find out what debt they had, and I was going to leverage the whole neighborhood against them. I pulled out my laptop, pushed the foreclosure notice aside, and started Googling. I wasn't going to lawyer up. I was going to accountant up. This wasn't over, you plastic-fenced tyrants. This was war, and I was about to find the biggest financial chink in the HOA's armor. I spent the next 48 hours in a state of hyper-focused, caffeine-fueled mania. I was no longer Gary, the smoked paprika chicken wing king. I was Gary, certified public madman. My kitchen table, recently spotless and ready for grilling accessories, was now a geopolitical disaster zone of spreadsheets, legal documents, and empty coffee mugs. My day job, which is basically boring, highly structured data analysis, insurance claims, if you must know, suddenly became my superpower. It turns out that when you spend 8 hours a day tracking down fraudulent claims for $14.50 worth of stolen dental floss, you become really, really good at sniffing out financial nonsense. The HOA, despite being run by Barb the Despot, is technically a non-profit corporation. which meant they had to file public records, tax forms, budget meeting minutes, capital reserve projections, the whole boring enchilada. I started pulling everything. The first thing I found was a list of their rules. I'm telling you, I needed a laugh, and boy did I get one. I thought the light bulb thing was bad. I found a list of truly ludicrous restrictions that made me realize Barb wasn't just unhinged. She was operating on a completely different plane of reality. Here, for your sheer horror and amusement, are some actual legally binding rules I found in the HOA's CC&Rs. Section 4.111b. All exterior holiday lighting shall be installed no sooner than the day following Thanksgiving and must be removed by 12 o'clock p.m. on January 2nd. Any light visible thereafter shall incur a fine of $75 per day per visible bulb. So, no afternoon naps on January 2nd, I guess? Section 6.03a. Any vegetable garden visible from the street must be grown in an approved square raised bed, not exceeding 4 blaars text wash feti, times 4 blaar text watt fet, and must exclusively contain heirloom, non-hybrid varieties listed in the Pinnacle Ridge Approved Produce List, PRE-PL. My tomatoes aren't fancy enough? Are they going to genetically test my basil? Section 7.08. The color eggshell white is strictly prohibited on all trim surfaces, as its reflective index, measured LH-AA-BWA, coordinates LOs 96 sots, AA 1.2, BRs 5.51, is deemed too stimulating to the eye, thus disrupting the community's desired muted tranquility. Yes, they had color coordinates. I needed a drink. Section 9.01c. No motorized vehicle washing shall occur on driveways between the hours of 8 o'clock a.m. and 5 o'clock p.m. on weekdays, unless the vehicle is a certified low-emissions hybrid displaying a valid local county sticker. God forbid anyone see me washing my pickup truck before 5 p.m. I was genuinely astonished. Barb had managed to codify her neuroses into neighborhood law, and she was using this nonsense to try and seize my property. I moved past the rule book and into the real meat, the budget. This is where things went from laughably absurd to financially criminal. HOAs survive on two things: regular dues and a capital reserve fund, CRF, which is basically a rainy day savings account for big-ticket items like roof replacements or fixing the main gate. The CRF is supposed to be fully funded. I cross-referenced the 2024 budget with the 2023 expenditures. Dues were coming in fine. The money was disappearing fine. But the CRF was supposed to be at about $500,000. The ledger showed it hovering around $120,000. Where did $380,000 go? I traced the massive expenditure to a single line item: Community Aesthetic Enhancement Project, the Serene Sentinel Pond and Pathway. Ah, the infamous koi pond. Barb had championed this project for 2 years, claiming the neighborhood needed a Zen focal point and a monument to peaceful living. Everyone else had called it the swamp of needless spending. It was built on a piece of common land that nobody used, and it looked less like a Zen garden and more like a half-dug ditch with some sad-looking ornamental grasses. And apparently, it had a ridiculous price tag. The invoices were a comedy of errors. A $30,000 consulting fee for an out-of-state feng shui specialist. $85,000 for a custom-built artisanal gazebo that was already listing to the left. And the kicker? $250,000 for the pond construction itself, which was wildly over budget because Barb insisted on Italian marble coping around the edge. Italian marble. In the middle of the Arizona desert. This $250,000 folly hadn't been paid for entirely out of the reserve fund. They'd taken out a loan. I stared at the screen, heart hammering. There it was. In the notes payable section of the balance sheet, a $200,000 secured promissory note taken out in early 2023 from a local but relatively obscure lender called Omni Valley Financial Services. It was so simple, so painfully obvious, it hit me like a rogue pool noodle at a community pool party. Barb was trying to shake me down for $22K because the HOA was cash-strapped and desperate to patch up their own ridiculous hole, the hole she dug. They were foreclosing on me because they were financially mismanaging the whole darn place. Then the truly insane idea formed. It wasn't just revenge, it was financial jujitsu. If they can buy my house for a ridiculous debt, I can buy their debt. I started laughing. A genuine, slightly hysterical cackle. Am I crazy? I muttered to the empty kitchen. Probably. But is it as crazy as an HOA trying to steal my house over a rogue sunflower? Nope. I immediately called Mike, my lawyer buddy, hoping he hadn't blocked my number yet. Gary, if this is about the light bulb again, it's not, Mike. It's about a $200,000 note payable held by Omni Valley Financial Services. Silence. Then a hesitant, "You're serious." Gary, what did you do? Nothing yet. But tell me this. If I, Gary, were to approach Omni Valley and offer to buy that $200,000 note to buy the HOA's debt, could I become the HOA's creditor? Well, yes, Mike said slowly. A promissory note is an asset. They could sell it. You would become the holder of the debt, and the HOA would owe you the payments. It's technically feasible. But Gary, you need $200,000. Do you have $200,000? I don't, I admitted. But I have assets, and I have vengeance. My plan involved a few necessary sacrifices. I had a small boat, a vintage fiberglass beauty named the Chill Pill, that was currently sitting in storage. Gone. I had a surprisingly valuable collection of first edition Watchmen and Sandman comics. Tears were shed, but they went to a buyer. I even sold my old riding mower on Craigslist, a ridiculous transaction involving a guy who showed up in a bathrobe and paid in small, sticky bills. I secured a small, painful loan against my 401k, convincing myself it was a strategic investment in my housing security. I was liquidating my life to buy the debt of a ridiculously over-budget koi pond. The next 3 days were a blur of bank transfers and paperwork that Mike reluctantly supervised. He kept calling it the stupidest, most convoluted act of petty revenge I have ever seen a client execute. I took it as a compliment. Omni Valley Financial didn't care who bought the debt, as long as it was paid off. To them, a secured note is just a number. They were delighted to sell it for a slight discount for the immediate cash injection. On Friday afternoon, the final documents arrived via secure courier. They looked exactly like the original foreclosure notice, thick, legal, and smelling faintly of destiny. I unfolded the official document. It named me, Gary, as the new holder and assignee of the $200,000 note. I wasn't just a homeowner anymore. I was, legally speaking, the HOA's bank. I looked at the foreclosure notice Barb had sent me. Then I looked at the new document naming me the master of their financial fate. I leaned back in my chair, the manic energy finally fading, replaced by a cold, unsettling calm. "You wanted to play hardball, Barb?" I whispered to the empty room. "We're playing hardball now." The next move wasn't a fine. It was a demonstration of power. I needed to establish my new authority, and I knew exactly how. By launching the most ridiculous, pointless, and financially crippling mandatory community improvement project the neighborhood had ever seen. With the promissory note safely tucked into my filing cabinet, right next to the deed for my house where it belonged, I knew I couldn't just sit on my new financial leverage. You don't buy a $200,000 debt from a small-time lender just to send a stern email. You do it for the shock and awe. I needed a project, something highly visible, something completely useless, something that screamed, "The new management is unhinged and also fully compliant with Section 4.02, subsection Q." I settled on a mandatory community wellness and aesthetics gateway arch. It was, in fact, an enormous, structurally dubious wooden arch that would span the entire cul-de-sac entrance. It was also going to be painted the exact shade of eggshell white that Barb Calloway had forbidden in Section 7.08 because it was too stimulating. I was a rule breaker, yes, but I was also a rule maker now. And my new rule was, behold, the stimulating eggshell white arch. The first step was hiring the contractors. I didn't want quality. I wanted chaos. I wanted people who could take my bad idea and make it exponentially worse. I found Artisan Al's Home and Garden Sculptures. Artisan Al showed up to the initial consultation wearing overalls, a wide-brimmed straw hat, and smelling faintly of turpentine and broken dreams. "So, the arch," I said, pointing to the spot where our relatively normal street met the main road. "It needs to be a gateway, inspirational, but mostly it needs to be up fast and look mildly questionable." Al squinted at the spot. "Questionable, you say? I can do questionable. My specialty is the abstract rustic fusion. I once made a shed that looked like a giant confused mushroom." "Perfect," I said, handing him the sketch, a crude drawing of a wooden semicircle. "We need this built from reclaimed barn wood. I want it to look like it was maybe half finished by beavers, but in a charming, community-driven way." "The structural integrity?" Al asked, scratching his chin. "Secondary to the aesthetics," I replied firmly. "And I want it painted. The trim color must be eggshell white. Eldal 96A 1.2. Very specific." Al nodded. "Ah, the forbidden coordinate. I like your moxie, friend. I like the sheer defiance of it all." We signed the contract, which included a ridiculously inflated charge for artistic consultation and luminary placement, which was just me telling him to nail a cheap floodlight on top. The next morning, the crew showed up. They were loud. They were messy. And they started the construction using lumber that looked suspiciously like old shipping pallets. It was a masterpiece of impending failure. It took Barb Calloway exactly 45 minutes to spot the visual atrocity happening at the end of her street. I know, because my phone rang right as Artisan Al was using a circular saw to carve a smiley face into the main support beam. "Gary!" The sound of her voice could strip paint off a wall. "What, in the name of all that is legally binding, is going on at the entrance of this subdivision?" I held the phone slightly away from my ear. "Good afternoon, Barb. Or should I say, President Calloway." I made sure to use the formal, respectful language she craved, but with the tone of a man holding 4 aces and a flamethrower. "Don't you President Calloway me. You have an unapproved structure being erected on common property. Where is the Architectural Review Committee, ARC, approval?" "Ah, Barb, that's where you're mistaken," I said, lowering my voice to a smug whisper. "This is a mandatory community wellness and aesthetics gateway arch. Per Section 3.01A of the bylaws, the board has the right to authorize projects deemed essential to community stability and morale. "But we didn't authorize this. I'm the president," she shrieked. "Are you?" I asked innocently. "See, I was just reading the minutes from last week's special financial meeting. Per Resolution 2024/F12, due to a critical capital reserve shortfall, all non-essential contracts, including the $200,000 promissory note for the Serene Sentinel Pond, have been red flagged. And per Section 5.07, the largest single creditor to the association, when debts are in arrears, may petition for temporary project oversight to secure their investment." I paused for dramatic effect. "And Barb, I own that $200,000 debt. Omni Valley Financial sold it to me. So, as the association's primary creditor and an authorized petitioner, I am securing my investment, which frankly is severely threatened by your financial mismanagement." You bought our debt? You? The man with the illegal $2,600K light bulb? She sounded genuinely winded. It was a beautiful sound. The light bulb, Barb, is now operating within the community's Creditor's Discretionary Ambience Clause. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to consult with Artisan Al on the optimal placement for our stimulating new eggshell white banner. Have a nice day. I hung up, grinning. Barb's only weapon was the rule book, and I had just used her own financial folly to snatch it out of her hand. But Barb was nothing if not persistent. She knew that financial legalese meant nothing to the average person. Her next step was predictable. The police. I was watching Al struggle to attach a plastic heron to the top of the arch when a squad car rolled slowly down the street. It was a beautiful cliché moment. A tall, world-weary officer named Officer Jenkins stepped out. He looked exactly like a man who spent 90% of his shift dealing with stray dogs and the people who hate them. "Afternoon, sir," Officer Jenkins said, his voice a low monotone of professional exhaustion. "We received a complaint about vandalism and unauthorized, structurally unsound construction of a public nuisance here on community property." "Ah, yes. That would be President Calloway," I sighed, gesturing to the car where Barb was now parked, taking pictures with her phone like a paparazzi photographer for the criminally boring. "She stated you are defacing a community asset," the officer confirmed. "Officer, I understand," I said calmly. "But here's the thing. Do you hate HOAs?" Officer Jenkins did not even blink. "Sir, I am unable to comment on the internal operations of private civic organizations." But his eyes told a different story. They were the eyes of a 1,000-yard stare, having seen things that could not be unseen, like disputes over the height of mailbox numbers. "Right," I said. "Well, let me clarify the situation. My name is Gary. I am a resident and also, as of 3 days ago, the largest single creditor to this organization. They owe me $200,000 for a loan that funded the other public nuisance, the koi pond. This arch is an authorized capital asset diversification project designed to protect my investment." I handed him the legal document from Omni Valley, which was much more complicated than any noise complaint. Officer Jenkins read the title of the document. Then he read the assignment clause. Then he looked at Artisan Al, who was now hammering an old tire into the base of the arch for aesthetic ballast. He sighed. A long, profound sigh that contained the existential burden of all law enforcement in areas governed by CCNRs. "So what you're telling me," the officer summarized, his voice flat, is that the Homeowners Association is attempting to file a criminal complaint against you for building a questionable wooden arch, but you are legally the bank that owns the entire Homeowners Association. In short, I confirmed, yes, they are trying to arrest their own landlord. Officer Jenkins handed the paperwork back. He walked to the patrol car, leaned into the passenger window, and spoke to Barb. I couldn't hear the exact words, but I could guess. It probably involved phrases like civil matter, large confusing amounts of debt, and maybe stop calling 911. Barb's face went from indignant rage to stunned, deflated fury. She slammed her phone down and sped away, screeching the tires. A definite violation of Section 512. Quiet and respectful departure from common areas. I made a mental note to fine her later. Officer Jenkins returned to me, shaking his head. "Mr. Gary," he said, "I'm going to advise you to complete your project quickly, and also maybe don't make it look like it's going to fall on a school bus." "Duly noted, officer," I said, giving him a crisp salute. The police were gone. The contractors were still hammering. Barb was defeated for the moment. I stood there, amidst the chaos of my new arch, and realized I hadn't just beaten the HOA. I had weaponized finance against them. The little foreclosure notice they sent me was my declaration of independence. The debt I bought was my army. And now it was time for the final, satisfying blow. I still had that foreclosure notice they sent me. It was time to return the favor, using their own language, their own cruelty, against the one person who truly deserved it. The plan was perfect. The board meeting was set for Thursday, and I had a special, custom-printed legal document waiting for Barb. The special board meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening in the Pinnacle Ridge Community Room, which was essentially a small, windowless box above the defunct pool equipment shed. The air already smelled like stale coffee and simmering resentment. I decided to forgo the power suit. This was a hostile takeover, yes, but it needed to be delivered with maximum casual disrespect. I showed up in my best Hawaiian shirt, the one with the vibrant blue and orange floral pattern, and a pair of well-worn, comfortable sandals. I even brought my own coffee mug, just to underscore that I wasn't buying their gross community room blend. The board was small. Barb Calloway, president; Jim, treasurer, a nervous man who clearly just wanted to be home watching golf; and Carol, secretary, who meticulously documented every passive-aggressive glance. They were sitting around a particle board table, looking deeply uncomfortable. Barb looked like she hadn't slept in a week. Her perpetually tight bun was slightly askew. Her eyes, usually darting with judgmental fury, held a weary suspicion. She was trying to project authority, but the sight of my stimulating eggshell white arch, now visible from the meeting room window, was clearly undermining her composure. "Mr. Gary," Barb began, hitting the "Mr." with a sharp, accusatory snap. "This special meeting was called based on your highly irregular petition regarding the association's fiscal viability. As president, I have grave concerns about the true intent of this meeting." "Intent, Barb?" "My intent is purely financial, and frankly, ethical," I said, leaning back and resting my sandals on a vacant chair. "You attempted to liquidate my primary asset, my house, over a $150 technicality. I simply became the largest stakeholder in your organization to protect my investment. Now let's discuss the budget." I pulled out a thick binder, all printouts from the public records, highlighted aggressively in neon pink. It looked official, even if it was just copies of their own mistakes. "Jim, as treasurer, I assume you are fully versed in the details of the $200,000 loan from Omni Valley Financial, correct? Poor Jim turned a shade of gray that matched the community room walls. Well, I signed the papers, yes. For the pond. For the pond, I repeated, sighing dramatically. A pond that cost $250,000 and is now, according to my recent inspection, leaking slightly into the common area drainage. A pond that was financed by draining the Capital Reserve Fund, leaving the association highly vulnerable. Laid out the first sheet. It was a breakdown of their spending. Here's the problem, board. The $200,000 note is secured by the association's common assets, meaning the pool, the shed, and the land. I now hold that note. The terms state that if the association falls into material breach of fiduciary duty or exhibits gross financial negligence, the debt holder has the right to demand immediate, accelerated repayment of the principal. Barb's jaw clenched. We are current on our payments, Mr. Gary. Are you? I asked, smiling wide. Let's review Resolution 2023-P4, which authorized the purchase of that Italian marble coping for the pond. That purchase cost $85,000. I've cross-referenced the invoice. The marble was purchased from a company owned by Barb's cousin, Tony Calloway. Jim and Carol gasped simultaneously. Furthermore, I continued, pressing the advantage, that marble was priced at $20 per square foot, while a comparable supplier quoted Jim here, on a recorded email, at only $8 per square foot. That's a gross overpayment of about $58,000. This, Jim, Carol, is known as self-dealing and misappropriation of funds. Barb leaped up, knocking her chair backward. That is an outrageous slander. Tony's marble is superior. It offers a deeper reflection. It enhances the feng shui. No, Barb. It enhances your cousin's wallet, I countered, dropping my tone to ice cold. And it exposes the entire association to ruin. As the primary creditor, I am now officially invoking the acceleration clause. I slammed a stack of papers onto the table. It made a satisfying thwack. The HOA owes me $198,450 plus interest, due in full immediately. You don't have it. Your reserve fund is toast. And unfortunately, the only item on your balance sheet that represents pure, unnecessary, and easily disposable expenditure is the employment and compensation of the board president. I pushed the top document toward her. It was custom printed on bright yellow paper, the exact shade of the original foreclosure notice she sent me. This is a notice of default and temporary cessation of executive authority, I announced, the words hanging heavy in the musty air. Due to your willful and documented financial negligence, the primary creditor, that's me, is placing a lien on the board president's salary, expense account, and any common asset she directly controls. Effective immediately, you are suspended from your position. You have breached your fiduciary duty, and frankly, you are bankrupting the neighborhood. Barb snatched the paper. Her eyes scanned the legal language that Mike had helped me craft to mirror the official HOA bylaws perfectly. She read the bolded section. Immediate surrender of all keys, electronic access codes, and administrative materials pending forensic financial review by the creditor. She was legally, financially, and morally dismantled. She was just Gary, the guy with the illegal light bulb, now using $200,000 to fire her. This is illegal! This is harassment! Barb screamed, her voice cracking. No, Barb, I said, standing up, finally towering over the table. This is a consequence. You taught me the rules. You told me that failure to pay an absurd debt leads to loss of assets and control. You wanted to take my house for $22,150. I just took your power for $200,000. I learned from the best. Now I suggest you vacate the premises and turn over the office key to Jim." Jim looked terrified, but also strangely relieved. Carol just kept taking notes, documenting the literal collapse of Barb's reign. Barb, defeated and sputtering, realized she had no legal leg to stand on, not without admitting guilt, self-dealing, and the HOA's true insolvency. She grabbed her purse, shot me a look that promised eternal damnation, and stalked toward the door. She didn't even slam the door. Too much dignity, I guess. Pathetic. I watched her go. I took a deep breath. "All right, Jim," I said, turning to the terrified treasurer. "First order of business for the new board, ordering a pizza." The dust settled, but the absurdity remained. I was the reluctant, Hawaiian shirt-wearing king of Pinnacle Ridge. It was the most accidental coup d'etat in suburban history. Jim and Carol were actually decent people, just steamrolled by Barb's tyrannical efficiency. We spent the next month unwinding her financial knots. We froze the payments to Tony Calloway's marble company immediately. We launched a real audit and found more minor infractions. A $5,000 expense for board retreat stress toys, and a $300 subscription to a Leadership and Color Theory magazine. I officially took the role of interim financial officer, mainly because I already owned the debt. I didn't want to be president. That sounded like work. I just wanted peace. I addressed the reader directly about the sheer awkwardness of my new life. "Look, I didn't want this job. I wanted to grill. I wanted to nap. Now I'm dealing with bids for tree trimming and arguing about the proper pH balance of the pool. It's a nightmare. It's like being forced to manage a very small, extremely annoying country where everyone cares deeply about their flower beds." I couldn't resist implementing 1 or 2 new rules, though. Not Barb-style rules, but anti-Barb rules. My first executive action, passed unanimously by the newly compliant and pizza-fed board, was the Gnome Liberty and Free Expression Clause. Section 1.01d. New. Homeowners are explicitly permitted to display any gnome, figurine, statuette, or lawn ornament of their choosing, regardless of material, color, or perceived aesthetic value. The HOA shall not interfere with the life and liberty of said gnomes. My second rule was simpler and more personal. Section 4.2b. New. The use of any light bulb with a Kelvin rating exceeding 2500 Kelvin is permitted, provided the homeowner provides a complimentary tray of smoked paprika-rubbed chicken wings to the board. The gateway arch? Artisan Al finished it. It looked exactly as ridiculous as planned. Uneven, aggressively eggshell white, and tilting slightly. But it was my ridiculous, aggressively eggshell white, slightly tilting arch. I renamed it the Sentinel of Necessary Defiance. What happened to Barb? Jim told me she sold her house within the month and moved to a neighboring community called The Meadows at Eternal Compliance. "She's already trying to get on their board," Jim whispered, terrified. "Apparently they have a strict no pets rule, and she's trying to fine a guy for owning a goldfish. Some people just can't quit the power trip." As for me, I settled into my reluctant reign. I paid off the debt to myself, which was easy, but still required filling out forms, unfortunately. My house was safe, my light bulb was bright, my gnome army was mobilized. One evening, I was out back, the smell of charcoal smoke filling the Arizona air. The grill was roaring. The wings were perfect. My light fixture, the one that started this whole absurd mess, was blazing at a glorious, overstimulating 2,600 kildollars. A police car drove slowly past my house. It was Officer Jenkins. He paused, rolled down his window, and gave me a slow, appreciative nod. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. I smiled back, the hero of the suburbs, the guy who bought an HOA just to avoid a $22K fine. I stood there, watching the sun set over the cul-de-sac. It was a beautiful, peaceful scene. A little too peaceful, maybe. I briefly considered passing a new rule banning all colors except eggshell white, just to shake things up. Nah, that's Barb's game. My game is peace. Good food, and maybe just a little bit of financial terrorism when necessary. So yeah, I bought an HOA. It was stupid, expensive, and a total pain. I lost my precious comic books and my boat, the Chill Pill. But hey, at least I can paint my mailbox rainbow now, if I wanted to. And I never have to worry about a letter from President Barb Calloway ever again. Was it worth it?